I am Audrey, 34, and I built my tech consulting firm from nothing into a seven-figure business. I trusted Stephanie completely, which is why the unmuted phone call shattered my world. Her words still echo. She has to go into early retirement. Instead of confronting them, I strategized silently. The day they returned from their luxury retreat, keycard access denied, they found my note, explaining the $2.3 million sale. Their screams could be heard across the lobby. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to outsmart someone who underestimated you. The journey that led to that fateful day began 8 years ago. I had always been passionate about computer science, graduating at the top of my class from University of Michigan with dual degrees in computer science and business administration. After spending 5 years climbing the corporate ladder at a major tech firm in Chicago, I realized I was building someone else's dream instead of my own. I took the leap into entrepreneurship with savings that would last 6 months if I was frugal. Those early days consisted of working from my tiny apartment, taking any client I could find, and pulling all-nighters to deliver projects on time. The risk was terrifying but exhilarating. After the first year, I had enough steady clients to rent a small office space and hire my first employee, Jessica, who would become not just my most trusted team member but a dear friend. It was at a tech conference in San Francisco where I met James. He approached me after my presentation on innovative data security solutions, expressing genuine interest in my methodology. Tall with salt and pepper hair, despite being only in his late 30s, James had an impressive background in business development and connections throughout the industry. Our complementary skill sets seemed perfect for partnership. He brought the network and sales expertise. I brought the technical knowledge and creative solutions. Within 5 years, what started as my solo venture had grown into Audratech Solutions, a respected firm with 15 employees occupying an entire floor in a sleek downtown office building. We specialized in custom security solutions and business intelligence platforms for mid-sized companies looking to scale. Our client list included regional banks, healthcare providers, and emerging tech startups. Stephanie walked into our office 3 years ago with an impressive resume and contagious enthusiasm. With her master's degree from Northwestern and experience at a competitor, she seemed like the perfect addition to our team. Her interview was memorable not just for her technical knowledge but for the vision she expressed for where she saw the industry heading. James and I were both impressed by her confidence and forward-thinking ideas. What started as a junior consultant position quickly evolved as Stephanie proved her value. Within 6 months, she was leading her own projects. By the 1-year mark, she had brought in 3 major clients through her previous connections. I promoted her to senior consultant and increased her salary, significantly viewing her as an investment in our company's growth. Our office culture was something I took tremendous pride in building. Unlike the cutthroat environments I had experienced in my corporate days, I wanted Audratech to feel collaborative and supportive. We had monthly team-building events, celebrated birthdays and work anniversaries, and implemented a profit-sharing program so everyone felt invested in our success. The office space itself reflected this philosophy, with an open-concept design, comfortable breakout areas, and a fully stocked kitchen. The industry took notice of our success. We won the Regional Business Innovation Award 2 years in a row, and I was named to the 40 Under 40 list in our city's business journal. Clients frequently commented on the difference between our approach and our competitors. We were not just vendors, but partners in their success, taking the time to understand their business goals rather than simply implementing technical solutions. My leadership style was hands-on. I knew every client by name and remained involved in the technical aspects of our projects. While James handled much of the business development and client relationships, I ensured our solutions were innovative and effective. It was exhausting at times, but the satisfaction of building something meaningful made the long hours worthwhile. The company hit significant financial milestones each year. We crossed the $1 million revenue mark in year 3, and by year 5 we were approaching $3 million. Profits were reinvested into research and development with particular focus on proprietary methodologies that set us apart from competitors. We had developed a unique approach to systems integration that became our signature offering, resulting in a patent application with my name as the primary inventor. Our expansion plans included opening a second office in Atlanta, where we had a growing client base. The 5-year projection showed potential to double both our team size and revenue. These were not just dreams, but carefully calculated goals based on our consistent growth trajectory. Jessica had been with me almost from the beginning. She started as a technical assistant and grew into our operations manager, keeping everything running smoothly behind the scenes. Unlike Stephanie, who commanded attention in any room, Jessica was quietly competent, solving problems before most people even noticed them. Her loyalty was unwavering, and she often stayed late with me working through challenging projects. Building the business required significant personal sacrifices. My dating life was practically non-existent, and I frequently missed family gatherings due to work commitments. My parents worried about my work-life balance, but I assured them it was temporary, just until the business was stable enough to run without my constant attention. That mythical moment always seemed just around the corner but never quite arrived. What truly set Audratech apart was our methodology. While competitors offered generic solutions, we developed a proprietary framework called the integration matrix that mapped client business processes to technological solutions in a comprehensive way. This approach reduced implementation time by 30% and improved user adoption significantly. It was this methodology that clients were willing to pay premium rates to access. A typical day at the office before things changed would start with our morning huddle, a 15-minute stand-up meeting where team members would share priorities and challenges. I would then split my time between client calls, project reviews, and product development. Lunch was usually at my desk or in meetings and evenings, often involved networking events or working late to stay ahead of deadlines. Exhausting but fulfilling. My vision for the company was ambitious but clear: to become the go-to technology partner for mid-market companies known for both innovation and reliability. I wanted Audratech to be a place where talented people could build meaningful careers without the toxic elements so common in the tech industry. Success would be measured not just in revenue, but in client retention and employee satisfaction. In those early days, Stephanie and I worked closely together. I mentored her on our methodologies and introduced her to key clients. We would spend hours brainstorming solutions for particularly challenging projects, and I was impressed by her quick thinking and creative approaches. She seemed genuinely appreciative of the opportunities I provided, often thanking me for taking a chance on her and expressing excitement about our company's future. The financial success under my leadership created a strong foundation. We maintained healthy profit margins while keeping our pricing competitive, and we had zero debt with a comfortable cash reserve for unexpected opportunities or challenges. It was a business I had every reason to be proud of, built through years of dedication, innovation, and perseverance. Little did I know that the company culture I had so carefully cultivated would be the perfect environment for betrayal to take root and flourish right under my nose. The shift was so subtle that I almost convinced myself I was imagining things. It started with little moments that seemed innocuous in isolation, but formed a pattern in retrospect. Walking into the break room to find conversations suddenly shifting. Sideways glances between James and Stephanie during meetings, projects being reassigned without clear explanation. Stephanie began suggesting I take more time off, emphasizing how I had earned it after years of dedication. "Audrey, when was the last time you took a real vacation?" she asked during our monthly planning meeting. "The company can run without you for a week or two. You should trust the team you've built." Her concern seemed genuine, and James nodded in agreement. At the time, I felt touched by their apparent concern for my well-being. James, who had always been transparent about client interactions, became increasingly secretive about certain meetings. "Just routine maintenance," he would say dismissively when I asked about his lunch with our biggest client. "Nothing you need to worry about." This from the same partner who previously shared every detail of client conversations. Then came the emails. Important client communications, where I was accidentally left off the thread. Strategy discussions happening without my input. When confronted, there were always plausible explanations. "Oh, I thought you were copied," or "We didn't want to bother you with the details since you've been so busy." The first concrete evidence came from Harold, the CEO of FinTech Partners, one of our most valuable clients. During a quarterly review, he casually mentioned, "Your partner Stephanie gave us some interesting proposals last week." I maintained my composure while my mind raced. Stephanie was a senior consultant, not a partner, and any proposals should have gone through me first. In team meetings, my ideas were suddenly being met with hesitation or subtle dismissal. Even more concerning, I would sometimes hear my exact concepts presented by Stephanie days later to enthusiastic reception from the team. When I pointed out that I had suggested the same approach earlier, she would smile apologetically and say, Great minds. Think alike, I guess. Without consulting me, Stephanie began reorganizing team structures for greater efficiency. Engineers who had reported directly to me were now routing their questions through her. Project management protocols I had established were modified with subtle but significant changes that diminished my oversight. Most concerning were the closed-door meetings between James and Stephanie that became increasingly frequent. Their offices would go silent when I walked past blinds drawn. When asked about these sessions, I received vague responses about long-term planning and client strategy. Jessica, ever observant, was the first to explicitly warn me that something seemed off. Over coffee one morning before the office filled, she cautiously shared her concerns. "I do not want to cause problems, Audrey, but have you noticed how Stephanie and James are always huddled together these days? And there is this tension when you walk into rooms. Something does not feel right." I assured Jessica I would pay closer attention, but even then I could not imagine the extent of what was happening behind my back. I had built this company from nothing. James had joined later, and Stephanie was someone I had personally mentored. The idea that they would conspire against me seemed paranoid and absurd. Then came the day of the fateful phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon and most of the team was out at a client site. I was working in my office with the door open, preparing for an important presentation. My phone rang with James calling, and I answered with my usual greeting. "Hi, James. What is up?" There was no response, but I could hear voices in the background. He had clearly called me accidentally and failed to end the call. I was about to hang up when I heard Stephanie's voice crystal clear through the speaker. "I think we need to accelerate the timeline. The Atlanta expansion is the perfect opportunity to suggest she step back into an advisory role. We can frame it as a natural transition as the company grows." James's voice responded. "Do you think she will go for early retirement? She is only 34. "That is why we need to approach it carefully," Stephanie continued. "We start by limiting her involvement in the new accounts. Then we suggest the company has outgrown her technical expertise and needs more professional management. The narrative needs to be that she would be doing what is best for the company she built." "And if she refuses?" James asked. "Then we get more aggressive. We have already moved most of the client relationships to our side. The board will back us if we present it properly. She has to go into early retirement one way or another if we want to take this company where it needs to go." My hands trembled as I continued listening. They discussed the fair compensation they would offer me, a fraction of what the company was worth. They talked about dividing my key client relationships between them. They even laughed about how I had been too trusting and naive about business realities. The betrayal was complete when James said, "She was good for the startup phase, but we need different leadership now. You are ready to be CEO, Stephanie. Your vision for the company is exactly what we need." I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear as my world collapsed around me. These were not just colleagues, but people I had trusted implicitly. James, who had been by my side for 5 years. Stephanie, who I had personally mentored and championed within the company. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Eventually, they ended their conversation and the call disconnected. I sat motionless for several minutes, trying to process what I had heard. Tears threatened, but I forced them back. This was not the time for emotional breakdown, but for clear thinking. When Jessica knocked on my door an hour later, I had composed my face into a neutral expression, though my mind was still reeling. "Everything okay, Audrey? You look pale." "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Big presentation tomorrow." "You work too hard," she said, echoing Stephanie's concerns, but with genuine care rather than hidden agenda. "Let me know if you need anything." I nodded, unable to trust my voice for more than simple responses. As she left, I made the decision that would change everything. I would not confront them. Not yet. Knowledge was power, and they had unknowingly given me the advantage of preparation. That night was the longest of my life. I lay awake reviewing every interaction, every decision, every moment of the past 3 years. How long had this been brewing? Were there signs I had missed? The friendship I thought I had with Stephanie, the partnership I believed in with James, all of it called into question. The sense of personal betrayal was overwhelming. These were people who had sat in my home for dinner, who had celebrated birthdays and company milestones with me, who knew about my dreams for the future. The professional betrayal was equally devastating. This company was my life's work, built through countless sacrifices and sleepless nights. Now they planned to push me out like an obsolete piece of equipment. As dawn broke, my sadness began hardening into something else: determination. They had underestimated me once by assuming I was too trusting. They would not underestimate me again. The morning after discovering the betrayal, I arrived at the office 15 minutes earlier than usual, wearing my favorite power suit and a carefully applied mask of normalcy. When Stephanie greeted me with her usual morning "Audrey, how was your evening?" I responded with practiced casualness about a non-existent dinner with friends. James stopped by my office later to discuss a client proposal, and I nodded and contributed as if nothing had changed while my mind catalogued every subtle manipulation in his presentation. By noon, the performance was taking its toll. I texted my best friend Diane asking to meet for an urgent coffee after work. Diane and I had been friends since college, but she worked in healthcare, completely removed from my industry. She would provide both emotional support and an objective perspective, untainted by professional considerations. At 5:30, I made a show of packing up my laptop and telling the team I was meeting an old friend for dinner. The small cafe where Diane and I met was 15 blocks from my office, far enough that I would not run into any employees or clients. The moment I saw her concerned face, my carefully constructed composure began to crack. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "You look like you have seen a ghost." Over the next hour, the whole story poured out, my voice breaking at times as I recounted the details of the phone call. Diane listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to outrage. "Those ungrateful vipers," she finally said when I finished. "After everything you have done for them, please tell me you are going to fight this." "I do not know what to do," I admitted. "Confronting them directly would just force their timeline. They would be prepared." Diane considered this, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Have you spoken to a lawyer? You need to know where you stand legally before making any moves." I had not considered this approach, still stuck in the emotional aftermath of betrayal. I would not even know who to call for something like this. "My brother-in-law Thomas is a corporate attorney," Diane offered. "He is discreet and brilliant. Talk to him before you do anything else." The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years, citing a migraine. By 9, I was sitting in Thomas's downtown office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials. Thomas was methodical, asking detailed questions about company structure, ownership agreements, and intellectual property. As I answered, a surprising picture emerged. While James and I were equal partners on paper in the overall business, my name alone was on the patent applications and proprietary methodologies that formed the core of our value proposition. The integration matrix, our most valuable asset, was legally mine. "This gives you significant leverage," Thomas explained. "They may control client relationships, but you control the intellectual property that makes those relationships valuable." "What are my options?" I asked, feeling the first stirrings of hope. "You could fight for control, which would be messy and public." Or, he paused meaningfully, "you could explore what the business is worth to outside parties." The seed was planted. Rather than engage in a protracted battle where employees would be forced to choose sides and clients might flee the conflict, perhaps there was a cleaner exit strategy. That afternoon, I contacted Brenda, a financial advisor who specialized in business valuation. After signing confidentiality agreements, I shared the company financials and explained the situation in clinical terms, keeping the emotional aspects private. "Based on your growth trajectory, proprietary technology, and client list," Brenda concluded after several days of analysis, "a reasonable valuation would be between $2 and $3 million. Given the intellectual property you personally hold, you could command the higher end of that range from the right buyer." With this knowledge, I began an after-hours mission. When the office emptied each evening, I stayed behind, methodically going through company records. What I found confirmed my worst fears and strengthened my resolve. Email threads between James and Stephanie dating back 9 months revealed their plan had been developing longer than I imagined. Draft business plans showed my role progressively minimized until I was merely a figurehead. Meeting notes documented systematic efforts to transfer my client relationships to Stephanie. Most damning were presentation decks, where Stephanie had taken credit for my innovations, including early versions of the integration matrix. In client materials, my contributions were increasingly anonymous, while Stephanie was prominently featured as the visionary behind our solutions. As painful as these discoveries were, they provided clarity about the true market value of what I had built. The company was worth fighting for, but perhaps not in the way James and Stephanie would expect. I spent a full weekend weighing my emotional attachment against practical considerations. This business represented 8 years of my life, countless sacrifices, and the fulfillment of professional dreams. Walking away would be heartbreaking, but staying to fight a battle against people who had already proven their willingness to betray me would be toxic and draining with no guarantee of victory. The decision crystallized: I would sell the company while it was still mine to sell, not to James and Stephanie at the fraction of value they planned to offer, but to an outside buyer who would pay what it was truly worth. My next steps followed a carefully constructed timeline. First, I created detailed documentation of all proprietary systems, ensuring the intellectual property was transferable. Second, I identified potential buyers in adjacent industries who might see strategic value in our client base and technology. Through Brenda's network, I was introduced to William Thompson, a successful tech entrepreneur who had recently sold his cybersecurity firm and was looking for new opportunities. His background made him uniquely positioned to understand the value of what I had built. Your integration matrix is exactly the type of proprietary system I have been looking for, William said during our first meeting at a private dining room in a restaurant across town. Combined with my security framework, we could offer something truly unique in the market. The initial offer was $1.8 million. After 2 rounds of negotiation, highlighting the growth potential and established client base, we settled on $2.3 million for a complete acquisition. The due diligence process was conducted with extreme discretion, with meetings scheduled away from my office and documents exchanged through secure channels. When James questioned my unusual absences and late-night work sessions, I explained I was exploring the Atlanta expansion in depth and wanted to present a comprehensive plan. This explanation played perfectly into their expectations, as they believed I was focused on a future they had no intention of letting me lead. Stephanie, meanwhile, was planning a 3-day team retreat at a luxury resort 2 hours outside the city. "We need to align on vision and strategy," she explained in the all-hands meeting, her eyes briefly meeting James's, with hidden meaning. "Everyone's attendance is crucial as we enter this new phase of growth." The retreat was scheduled for Wednesday through Friday, with the team returning to the office the following Monday. It was the perfect window of opportunity. "I cannot make the retreat," I announced with carefully rehearsed regret. "My cousin's wedding in California was rescheduled, and I am in the bridal party. I have tried to get out of it, but it is impossible." Stephanie could barely hide her satisfaction. "Family comes first," she said, with false understanding. "We will make sure to take detailed notes so you can catch up when you return." The wedding was fictional, but I did fly to California that weekend, staying with my actual family for emotional support, as I finalized the most difficult business decision of my life. My parents knew something was wrong, but respected my request to wait before explaining. On Friday morning, while the team was still at their retreat, posting group photos on social media, I met William at our attorney's office to sign the final paperwork. When the funds transfer confirmation appeared on my phone, showing $2.3 million in my account, I felt a complex mix of emotions: grief for what I was leaving behind, vindication for receiving fair value, and anxiety about an unwritten future. That evening, I returned to the empty office one last time. Walking through the space that had been my second home for years, memories flooded back. The corner where Jessica and I had worked side by side before we could afford more staff. The conference room where we had celebrated landing our first major client. The kitchen where countless team birthdays had been marked with cake and laughter. I collected the few personal items I had not already gradually removed over the previous weeks: family photos, my degree certificates, a card the team had signed for my birthday last year. Everything else would stay now, belonging to William. As arranged, a locksmith arrived at 7 to change all the access codes and physical locks. I watched as he worked methodically, symbolically sealing off my past from my future. The final task was the most difficult. I sat at my desk and wrote a detailed letter explaining the sale, including information about the transition to new ownership and William's contact details. I made multiple copies, placing one in an envelope for the front desk security guard to deliver one on Stephanie's desk and one in the break room. After placing my office key and company credit card on my desk, I took one final walk through the silent office. Each step was heavy with finality, but also increasingly lightened by the realization that I was walking away on my terms, not theirs. At the main door, I paused for one last look. "Goodbye," I whispered to the empty space that had held so many dreams. Then I turned and walked toward an unplanned but unburdened future. The process of selling a business, while maintaining complete secrecy, required precision planning that would have impressed a military strategist. Each step needed to be executed flawlessly to prevent James or Stephanie from catching wind of my intentions before everything was finalized. My first calls were to 5 potential buyers Brenda had identified, each with signed non-disclosure agreements before any information changed hands. These initial conversations happened during my lunch breaks at coffee shops, far from the office, with my phone set to private mode and my calendar marked with innocuous entries like dentist appointment or car maintenance. 3 of the 5 expressed serious interest after our preliminary discussions. 2 dropped out when they learned the timeline I needed to work within, finding it too aggressive for proper due diligence. But William remained enthusiastic, seeing strategic value that transcended typical valuation metrics. William Thompson had built and sold 2 previous technology companies, most recently a cybersecurity firm that complemented our service offerings. At 52, he had the experience and financial backing to move quickly when the right opportunity presented itself. His salt and pepper beard and relaxed demeanor belied a sharp business mind that immediately understood both the market value and strategic potential of Audratech. "Your integration methodology fills a gap in my service portfolio," he explained, during our second meeting, this time in a private room at his club across town. "Together with my security framework, we could dominate the mid-market space within 18 months. Our initial negotiations started with his offer of $1.8 million, which I countered at $2.5 million, armed with Brenda's valuation analysis. The documentation I provided showed clean financials, strong client retention, and proprietary technology with broad application potential. $2.3 million all cash, with a 30-day closing period, William offered during our third meeting, plus potential performance bonuses based on client retention after 6 months. The terms were fair, particularly given my need for a quick, clean exit. The due diligence process would normally take months, but William's experience and our mutual connections allowed for an expedited timeline. His team worked nights and weekends reviewing financials, client contracts, and technical documentation. Juggling these secret negotiations while maintaining a normal presence at the office required elaborate planning. When James questioned why I had missed our usual Tuesday lunch, I mentioned a quarterly planning session I was developing for the Atlanta expansion. When Stephanie asked about my unusually guarded calendar, I spoke vaguely about personal health appointments, knowing she would be too uncomfortable to press for details. The most challenging aspect was preparing the necessary documentation without raising suspicions. I worked late into the night at my apartment, organizing client information, documenting processes, and creating transition guides that would facilitate a smooth handover. During office hours, I carefully collected copies of critical documents, downloading them in small batches to avoid triggering any security alerts. Meanwhile, Stephanie was consumed with planning what she called a transformative team retreat at Eagle Ridge Resort, a luxury property featuring a golf course, spa, and executive conference facilities. The agenda she circulated included sessions on future vision and leadership transition, thinly veiled preparations for the changes she and James planned to implement upon their return. "This retreat will align everyone with our growth strategy," Stephanie announced during a planning meeting, making deliberate eye contact with everyone except me. "We need full participation to ensure buy-in from all team members." "I wish I could be there," I said, feigning disappointment. "But my cousin Elaine moved her wedding date due to venue issues, and I am standing up in the ceremony. The flights are already booked." "Family obligations are important," James said smoothly. "The company will survive without you for a few days." The irony of his statement was not lost on me. Little did he know how permanently the company would continue without me. As the retreat dates approached, I finalized the sale details with increasing urgency. The closing was scheduled for the Friday of the retreat, giving me the weekend to process the emotional weight of the transaction before the team returned on Monday to discover the changed locks and new ownership. The fictional wedding provided perfect cover for my actual trip to visit my parents in San Diego. I needed the emotional support of family as I processed the end of this chapter in my life. While I had not shared the full situation with them yet, they knew something significant was happening. "Whatever you are going through, we are here for you," my mother said, as she hugged me at the airport, concern evident in her eyes. That Friday morning, while my social media feed filled with photos of the team-building exercises and fancy dinners at Eagle Ridge, I sat in Thomas's law office with William and our respective attorneys signing the final transfer. Documents. The moment when my banking app displayed the incoming transfer of $2.3 million was surreal, a digital confirmation that my life had irrevocably changed. "Congratulations," William said, shaking my hand firmly. "I will honor what you have built and take good care of your team." "Almost all of them deserve that care," I replied, thinking of Jessica and the other innocent employees who would be caught in this sudden transition. After the closing, I returned to the empty office one final time. Security let me in without question, accustomed to my weekend work habits. Walking through the quiet space felt like moving through a museum of my professional life, each area holding memories of triumphs and challenges. The conference room where we had celebrated landing Peterson Financial, our first million-dollar client. The corner where Jessica and I had worked side by side during the early days, sharing a single desk to save on office costs. The break room where countless birthday celebrations and project completion parties had created a sense of family among the team. I methodically collected the few remaining personal items I had intentionally left to avoid raising suspicions: the framed photo of my graduation day, a small plant my mother had given me when I signed the original office lease, and a few books from my professional library. Everything else would remain, now belonging to William and the company's new incarnation. As arranged, the locksmith arrived precisely at 7:30, a quiet professional who asked few questions as he changed the entry codes and replaced the physical locks on the executive offices. I watched in silence as he worked each turn of the screwdriver, symbolically sealing off my past from my future. The most difficult task was still ahead. I sat at my desk and crafted a detailed letter explaining the sale and transition process. The tone was professional rather than accusatory, focusing on the business transaction rather than the betrayal that had precipitated it. To the Audratech team, I began. Effective immediately, Audratech Solutions has been acquired by William Thompson, former CEO of SecureTech Systems. All intellectual property, client contracts, and company assets have been legally transferred to the new ownership. The letter continued with practical details about the transition process, William's contact information, and assurances that all current employment contracts would be honored during a 90-day evaluation period. I made no mention of the betrayal I had uncovered, choosing instead to let the fact of the sale speak for itself. I made multiple copies of this letter, placing one in an envelope at the front security desk, with instructions to deliver it to the first team member who arrived Monday morning. Another copy went on Stephanie's desk, and a third in the break room where it would be seen by everyone. As a final gesture, I placed my office key and company credit card on my desk, visible evidence of my complete separation from the business I had built from nothing. The weight on my shoulders gradually lifted with each step toward the exit. By the time I reached the main doors, the initial grief had begun transforming into something unexpected relief. I was walking away on my terms, with fair compensation and my dignity intact. I turned for one last look at the office that had been the center of my professional universe for years. The space seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter to begin without me. Goodbye, I whispered, not to the physical space, but to the dream it had represented, and the person I had been while building it. Then I stepped into the warm evening air, and toward a future I had never planned, but now welcomed with open arms. Monday morning arrived with perfect dramatic timing. According to Jessica, who called me later that day, the team returned from their retreat in high spirits, arriving together at the office around 8:30. Stephanie led the group, keycard in hand, laughing about some inside joke from the weekend as she approached the main entrance. Her keycard did not work. She tried again, frowning at the red error light. Others in the group tried their cards with the same result. Confusion spread through the assembled team as they stood helplessly in the lobby. Maybe the system reset over the weekend, James suggested, pulling out his phone to call building management. While they waited, the security guard approached with an envelope. "I have a delivery for Stephanie Morgan," he announced, extending the sealed letter. The group gathered around as Stephanie opened the envelope, her expression shifting from annoyance to disbelief as she read the contents aloud. Jessica described how the color drained from Stephanie's face, her voice growing increasingly strained with each sentence. James grabbed the letter midway through, his eyes scanning rapidly back and forth. "This cannot be legal," he sputtered. "She cannot just sell the company without partner approval." But the security guard was already opening the door with a new master key, explaining that the building management had been officially notified of the ownership change on Friday. Inside, they found additional copies of the letter in the break room and on Stephanie's desk, along with a formal introduction from William Thompson, scheduling a team meeting for 10 that morning. According to Jessica, Stephanie's composure completely shattered when she reached her office and found my goodbye note. Her scream of rage echoed through the entire floor, bringing everyone running. She betrayed us, she kept repeating, the irony of her statement lost on her. How could she do this without warning? Frantic calls to my phone went straight to voicemail. I had anticipated this reaction and turned off my device, allowing myself space to process the emotional aftermath without their intrusions. The team retreated to a coffee shop across the street for an emergency meeting, shocked by the sudden development. Nancy from accounting, always Stephanie's ally, immediately suggested legal action. We can challenge the sale, she insisted. There must be some requirement for partner consultation. Their call to the company attorney quickly dispelled this hope. The partnership agreement, which James had signed without thoroughly reviewing years ago, gave either partner the right to initiate a sale with a qualified buyer, as long as certain valuation requirements were met. William Thompson's offer had exceeded those requirements. The intellectual property that formed the core value of the business had been primarily registered in my name with appropriate licensing to the company. This legal detail, overlooked during years of trust and collaboration, now proved decisive in enabling the clean sale. As the reality of the situation sank in, James turned on Stephanie. "This is your fault," he accused in front of the assembled team. "Your aggressive timeline pushed her to investigate. She must have overheard us." Stephanie's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as their private plotting became public knowledge. "You were just as involved," she shot back. "Do not pretend you were an innocent bystander." The team watched in shocked silence as the two supposed leaders descended into blame and recrimination, revealing the conspiracy that had been developing behind the scenes. For many loyal employees, this confirmation of betrayal was more disturbing than the sale itself. While this drama unfolded, all employees received an email from William Thompson introducing himself as the new owner. He assured them that their positions were secure during a 90-day transition period, after which performance reviews would determine the go-forward organization structure. Jessica and 4 other team members who had worked closely with me received separate emails. Mine explained the situation in more detail and included an invitation to meet privately to discuss potential opportunities with my new venture. "Your loyalty has never gone unnoticed," I wrote. "If you wish to continue our professional relationship in a new context, I would welcome that conversation." News of the sale spread rapidly throughout our industry. Former clients called William to confirm the ownership change and assess how it might affect their services. Competitors reached out to team members, with job offers sensing opportunity in the disruption. Industry forums buzzed with speculation about what had prompted the sudden sale of a seemingly successful company. William arrived at the office precisely at 10, projecting calm authority as he addressed the assembled team. His first official act was to announce that Stephanie had been moved to a senior consultant role, reporting to him directly, effectively demoting her from the leadership position she had coveted. James would retain his business development responsibilities, but would no longer serve on the executive committee. "The company will maintain its client commitments and core services," William assured everyone, "but we will be integrating new security offerings and expanding into additional markets. Change brings opportunity for those who choose to embrace it." Stephanie and James requested a private meeting with William immediately after the team session. According to information that filtered back to Jessica, they attempted to position themselves as essential to client retention and company operations. William listened politely but made no commitments beyond the standard 90-day evaluation period. The industry gossip machine worked overtime in the following weeks. I heard through mutual connections that Stephanie had approached several clients about following her if she left, only to discover that their contracts had been updated during the sale to include stronger non-solicitation clauses. James reportedly explored starting a competing firm, but found potential investors hesitant after the abrupt collapse of his previous partnership. From my perspective, watching from a distance as this chaos unfolded was strangely peaceful. I had removed myself from a toxic situation on my own terms, with financial security and my professional reputation intact. The betrayal still hurt, but the sting was significantly lessened by the knowledge that I had not allowed myself to become their victim. As one chapter closed decisively, another was already beginning to take shape in ways I could never have anticipated. The first week after selling Audratech was a roller coaster of emotions I had not fully anticipated. Monday brought relief and vindication as reports of the chaos filtered back through Jessica. Tuesday delivered a crushing wave of grief for the company I had built and lost. By Wednesday, anxiety about my future left me sleepless and questioning my decisions. Thursday sparked anger as I processed the depth of betrayal. But Friday morning I woke with an unexpected feeling freedom. My first official act as a newly liquid entrepreneur was meeting with Brenda, my financial advisor, to create a comprehensive plan for the windfall. Together we allocated the $2.3 million across several categories: retirement savings, investments, living expenses for the next 2 years, and seed funding for whatever might come next. You do not need to rush into anything, Brenda advised as we reviewed the numbers. With careful management, this gives you both security and options. Take some time to consider what you truly want for your next chapter. This permission to pause was precisely what I needed. For 8 years, every decision had been driven by business necessity and growth opportunities. Now I had the luxury of intention and careful consideration. After 2 weeks of decompression, including a genuine trip to visit my family in California, I began exploring possibilities for a new venture. The non-compete clause in the sale agreement prevented me from directly competing with Audratech in the same market segment for 18 months. But this limitation actually pushed me to consider adjacent opportunities I might otherwise have overlooked. I rented a small office in the Arts District, deliberately choosing a location and atmosphere completely different from my previous corporate space. The converted warehouse featured exposed brick walls, large windows, and a shared courtyard, where creative professionals gathered for coffee and impromptu collaborations. It was a physical representation of my intention to build something different this time. Jessica was the first to accept my invitation to discuss future opportunities. Over lunch at a quiet restaurant, I explained what had happened and my vision for a more balanced approach to business. "I should have warned you more explicitly," she said, regret evident in her expression. "I knew something was happening with those two, but I never imagined they would go so far." "You tried," I assured her. "I was not ready to hear it then, but I am grateful for your loyalty throughout." By the end of our meal, Jessica had agreed to join my new venture once her 90-day transition period with William concluded. 2 other former team members eventually followed along with a handful of smaller clients whose needs were not being met by the new Audratech direction. My new company, Integrity Partners, would be structured differently from the beginning. I drafted partnership agreements with clear protections and exit provisions. Profit sharing was built into the foundation rather than added as an afterthought. Most importantly, I implemented transparency practices that would make hidden agendas nearly impossible to maintain. I have learned my lesson about trust without verification, I explained to Thomas as he reviewed the legal framework. This time, the company structure itself will reinforce our values. 3 months into building this new venture, I ran into Gregory, a former client who had stayed with Audratech after the sale. We chatted casually about industry developments before he volunteered an update on my old company. William completely restructured everything he shared. Stephanie lasted barely 6 weeks before she was asked to leave. Apparently, her attitude became untenable once she realized the leadership role she expected was never going to materialize. And James, I could not help asking. Left to start his own consulting firm. Last I heard, he was struggling to gain traction. Turns out client relationships were tied more to your methodologies than to his sales approach. This information brought no joy, just a quiet confirmation that there was indeed justice in the business world, even if it arrived on its own timeline. 5 months after the sale, an unexpected message appeared in my email inbox from Stephanie. The subject line read, "Apology and explanation," though the content delivered neither effectively. "I never intended things to unfold as they did," she wrote. "Business decisions sometimes create unfortunate circumstances. I hope you understand that nothing was personal. Perhaps someday we can discuss what happened professionally." The email revealed more about her continued self-deception than any genuine remorse. I drafted several responses before deciding that silence was the most powerful reply. She had become irrelevant to my story, a character from a previous chapter not worth the energy of continued engagement. As Integrity Partners gained momentum, I implemented the lessons learned through betrayal. Our company culture emphasized transparency and direct communication. Conflicts were addressed immediately rather than allowed to fester. Decision-making processes were documented and inclusive. These practices attracted clients who valued authenticity alongside technical expertise. Your team operates differently, noted Laura, our newest client. There is none of the usual posturing and politics. It is refreshing to work with people who simply deliver what they promise. This feedback validated the principles I had built into the new company's DNA. The betrayal had been painful but educative, forcing me to examine my blind spots and strengthen my business acumen. The resulting venture was more resilient and aligned with my true values. 7 months after the sale, I encountered James at a local coffee shop. The awkward moment stretched between us as we waited for our orders, neither initially acknowledging the other. Finally, he approached my table with an uncertain smile. "Audrey, you look well. Can we talk for a moment?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about what he might say. "I want to explain what happened," he began, his confidence faltering under my steady gaze. "Things got complicated, and discussions that should have included you somehow never did." Before I knew it, Stephanie had created this narrative that the company needed different leadership, and I got caught up in it. "You were not caught up in anything, James," I replied calmly. "You were an active participant in planning to push me out of my own company. I heard everything on that call." His face flushed with the realization of exactly how their plan had been discovered. "That was a difficult time for everyone," he offered weakly. "I regret how things unfolded." "I do not," I said simply. "It led me exactly where I needed to be." Without waiting for his response, I gathered my things and walked out, leaving him with his tepid coffee and tepid excuses. The encounter confirmed how far I had come from the devastation of that initial betrayal. I felt nothing but mild curiosity and a touch of pity for someone still trying to justify his actions. The greatest revelation came not from confrontation, but from the gradual rebuilding of my professional identity on my own terms. With each client we signed, each team member who thrived in our collaborative environment, the narrative shifted from one of victimhood to one of intentional transformation. By the 9-month mark, Integrity Partners had established a stable client base and positive industry reputation. We were smaller than Audratech had been at its peak, but our profit margins were healthier, and our work environment noticeably more balanced. Team members rarely worked weekends, vacation time was genuinely protected, and professional development was prioritized rather than perpetually postponed. I had learned that success need not come at the cost of well-being, that boundaries strengthened rather than limited professional relationships, and that betrayal, while painful, could ultimately serve as a powerful catalyst for necessary change. As 1 full year approached since the sale, I realized I had built something I was more proud of than the company I had lost. Integrity Partners reflected my true values in ways Audratech never had, despite my best intentions. The betrayal had forced a reset that in retrospect was long overdue. The business world is rarely as straightforward as we might wish, but its complexities can push us toward greater authenticity if we remain open to the lessons hidden within our most painful experiences. On the 1-year anniversary of selling Audratech, I took the entire Integrity Partners team to dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city skyline. As I looked around the table at these professionals who had chosen to join my new venture, I felt a profound sense of gratitude that would have been unimaginable in the raw aftermath of betrayal. "I would like to make a toast," I said, raising my glass. "Not to business success, though we have certainly achieved that, but to authentic relationships built on mutual respect. That is the true foundation of everything we have created together." The journey from devastation to this moment of genuine celebration had been neither linear nor easy. The emotional healing process had unfolded in unpredictable waves, sometimes progressing steadily, other times pulling me back into anger or doubt when I least expected it. In those first months after the sale, I struggled with trust issues that extended beyond professional relationships. If people I had mentored and supported for years could betray me so completely, how could I safely open myself to new connections? The question haunted me, threatening to harden me in ways that would ultimately limit my potential for happiness and success. The breakthrough came through working with a business coach who specialized in trauma recovery. "The betrayal you experienced was real," she acknowledged during our first session, "but allowing it to permanently alter how you engage with others gives those who hurt you ongoing power over your future." This perspective shift became the cornerstone of my healing process. I began distinguishing between blind trust, which had made me vulnerable to betrayal, an informed trust which included appropriate boundaries and verification. This was not cynicism, but wisdom earned through painful experience. The impact on my approach to business relationships was transformative. I developed clearer agreements with specific accountability measures built in. Regular feedback sessions became non-negotiable elements of our company culture. Documentation of decisions and contributions became standard practice rather than an occasional formality. Trust, but verify, became our unofficial motto applied consistently regardless of seniority or relationship length. Far from creating a climate of suspicion, these practices actually fostered greater psychological safety. Team members knew exactly where they stood and how their contributions were valued. As my new business stabilized, I gradually reconnected with industry contacts on my own terms. Some had heard rumors about the dramatic sale, others knew only that I had started a new venture. I shared my story, selectively focusing on the lessons learned rather than the emotional drama. Each conversation reinforced my reclaimed narrative as someone who had faced adversity and emerged stronger. William Thompson and I maintained occasional professional contact, and through him I learned that Audratech continued to evolve under his leadership. Most of the original team had either followed me or moved on to other opportunities, leaving Stephanie and James as footnotes, rather than central characters in the company's ongoing story. The financial security provided by the sale gave me unprecedented freedom to build a business aligned with my deepest values. Integrity Partners maintained a deliberately sustainable growth rate, prioritizing quality of work and quality of life over rapid expansion. We declined clients whose values conflicted with ours regardless of potential revenue. These choices would have seemed impossibly idealistic in my previous company, constrained as it was by constant growth pressure. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurred in how I defined success itself. Where I had once measured achievement primarily through financial metrics and company size, I now considered factors like team well-being, client satisfaction, innovation quality, and personal fulfillment as equally important indicators. This broader definition of success created space for genuine work-life balance for the first time in my career. I established actual office hours, protected weekends, and took real vacations. The business continued to thrive, not despite these boundaries, but because of the clarity and focus they provided. I never sought direct confrontation or revenge against Stephanie or James. Their actions had ultimately catalyzed a positive transformation in my professional life, though I would never thank them for the painful process. Moving forward without the burden of resentment became its own form of victory, far more satisfying than any retribution could have been. The most valuable lesson from this experience was learning to recognize and honor my own worth. The betrayal had initially shaken my confidence, making me question my business acumen and leadership abilities. Rebuilding from that foundation of doubt required consciously acknowledging my contributions, strengths, and vision. Own your worth before others try to discount. It became my advice to other entrepreneurs, particularly women, who often face additional challenges in having their contributions recognized. This meant not just knowing your value intellectually, but embodying that knowledge in how you negotiate, collaborate, and lead. The ultimate gift of this difficult chapter was the opportunity to start over with the wisdom of experience. The business I built after betrayal was more intentional, more aligned with my values, and ultimately more successful by the metrics that truly mattered. Had I not been forced to sell Audratech, I might have continued on a path that was successful by conventional standards, but lacking in deeper fulfillment. Looking across the table at my team, I realized that the story that began with betrayal had transformed into something far more powerful, a testament to resilience, reinvention, and the possibility of building success on your own terms. When you face betrayal in your professional or personal life, remember that it reflects the character of those who betrayed you, not your worth or judgment. The path forward may not be clear immediately, but with strategic thinking and self-compassion, you can transform even the most painful experiences into foundations for a more authentic future. Have you ever had to completely restart after a betrayal or major setback? How did you turn that challenge into an opportunity? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and strategic comebacks. Remember, sometimes, the best revenge is not just success, but finding genuine happiness on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the strength to transform your own challenges into unexpected gifts.